If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Welcome to FP&A Today. I'm your host, Glenn Hopper. Today on the show, I'm joined by Stephen Hedlund, head of finance at Rillet, an AI-native ERP that's raised over $100 million from Sequoia, Andreessen Horowitz, and Iconic. Stephen is in a rare position. He's building the finance function at a company that's rebuilding the finance function. Rillet automates workflows that traditionally take weeks down to hours. And of course, Stephen's team uses their own product to do it. Before Rillet, he held finance and strategy roles at Walmart, Molecule, and OpenSpace. He's a Chicago Booth MBA. We'll discuss what AI native means in practice, where automation delivers measurable ROI, and what works when you're closing the books in real time. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. You have a great podcast voice, Glenn.
That's my broadcaster voice right there that makes it very, very clear that I'm reading. I'm fading back into that old DJ kind of voice when I do these intros, I think. And then as soon as we start talking, I lapse into my Southern accent and y'all and all that too.
I love it. No, thank you for having me. Very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so me too. And I know we've been talking a long time about having you on, so I'm glad we're finally getting this recorded. So you and I talked a lot about this before the show, but for our audience, I'd love to kind of start with your background, maybe even like what drew you into finance, some of the early lessons that you learned that still kind of shape how you work today, and just kind of build us up to how you got here.
Yeah, no, happy to. So I fell into finance partially by accident. So I was given a book on economics in high school and read the book, made incredible sense to me, and said, this is what I want to do. I thought I was going to go work for the World Bank, maybe the Federal Reserve, something like that. So studied economics in undergrad. It was impossible to get an internship there. I went to a no-name school. No one had any connections there. Very foolish of me to try to pursue that there. But a friend had worked at Walmart the prior summer in finance and said, hey, if you want to intern there, I had a great experience. Go take this advanced accounting class with this professor. If you do well, he'll refer you. I took the class. Professor referred me, had an amazing experience at Walmart. Yeah, I ended up going there full time after college. And that's really what put me into finance and accounting. The other way I ended up here is I read Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. And
I love Foundation. That's a whole other episode right there about why they shouldn't have ever made a TV show about it.
Oh my God.
Because it is an unfilmable book. But yeah, so sorry, I interrupted you because now I want to hear how psychohistory applies to.
Yes, exactly. So I read this concept of psychohistory and I found it fascinating, right? Where like he makes the case that if you have enough variables in the equation, you can predict the future. And I love that partially because you can't prove it, right? But also it makes sense theoretically. And I said, oh, what if I could do this, right? And like, that's part of what finance purports is if you have enough data there, you can forecast what the future is. So when I was very naive and young, I thought, oh, maybe I'll figure that out, go into, stock picking and become rich like Warren Buffett. That's obviously not what happened. Instead, I ended up just doing finance. But those are kind of the two things that pushed me this direction intentionally and unintentionally.
Oh, I think that's really going to appeal to our audience too, because like us, they're a special kind of nerds. It takes a special kind of nerd to go into FP&A, right? So actually, I never thought about that before, but psychohistory, my obsession on models, and I think the reason I sort of drifted away from sort of standard modeling and statistical modeling into machine learning was I got obsessed on the number of variables you could have. And I read Foundation when I was like 11 or 12 years old, and it must have been like deep in my mind, like, yes, you just need more variables. You just
yeah, if you just get more, it's going to work, features, right? And it's so funny because now that I work in finance, more variables is bad, right? It tends to be the simple models that are actually better at forecasting the future, whereas the more variables I bring to the equation give me a sense that I'm doing a better job, but it's not the case. It's the simple back of the envelope models that always end up being the best directionally.
I love it. I don't know. I had a professor tell me, and I to this day, I have a problem with it, but that I was confusing the map for the terrain. Like I get so obsessed on these models and like trying to make them perfect, and anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But I'm probably going to steal that from you, psychohistory and finance, going forward. I love that.
You should. And it's true. And you're right. They should have never made the movies. Very sad. I was very excited, thought it had a lot of potential. Did not work.
Yeah.
Separate conversation on unit economics of Apple TV. I don't think they're very good, but conversation for another day.
Yeah. All right. I'll try to bring us back, even though in the back of my mind, I'm just going to be thinking psychohistory the rest of the podcast. But you've seen both ends of the spectrum, large enterprise, Walmart, all the way from that all the way down to early stage startups. And I'm wondering, because you're seeing such a broad range, how has that range influenced your approach to, I don't know, before we even talk about the financials, like even building and leading teams?
Yep. Yeah. So when the story I come back to often is when I was at Walmart, we did a $16 billion debt deal. We were buying this company in India, wanted to finance it, $16 billion, massive deal. My role was basically to sit in the room. Once the money was in the bank, then I had to call, the banks and make sure we allocated it properly for the next few days till the transaction closed. But my job was basically to sit there, right? I joined a startup a couple of years later. We did a $5 million debt deal. I ran the whole show. Still pretty junior in my career at the time, but I'm the one pitching the bankers, telling the story, then telling the board which bank I think we should go with. And much different dollar size, but in terms of learning and impact, massive difference, right? And that's what I find is the case between kind of these enterprise and startups is the maybe dollar amount is very different, right? At Walmart, somebody would tell me, hey, we need a $10 million check for this thing. I'm like, okay, great. We move $3 billion a day. That's not going to change the math at all, right? Whereas here we deal with much smaller dollars, but the impact I get to have is very different. And I look for that in kind of the folks we hire as well, is I tend to find folks that come from corporate background and have been kind of in corporate too long, have very different expectations for what a startup is. In that at Walmart, we had entire teams to pull data together. It was incredible. And then at kind of later stage startups, you maybe don't have teams for data, but the data exists, right? You have to go get it. Whereas like especially early stage startup, there is no data. It doesn't exist. So if you come in expecting that you're going to have all these resources to help support you, they don't exist. Like you have to build those resources from the ground up to enable you. So for the teams, for the people that want to do that find that exciting, those are the folks you can hire. For folks that have a lot of experience kind of with a lot of support from other teams, like great, I'm sure they do very well, but they might struggle in that kind of startup environment is what I tend to see.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because don't you see, especially in the role and I know we talked before the show and hopefully we'll have time to get to it in the show as well. But obviously you got a great education at Booth, but when you dive into the startup world, it's almost like finishing school. And it's more like, imagine if you had just gone into, just a more traditional path into a big company or consulting or whatever it is. But when you're in the startup, you have to wear so many hats. That's not my job is never the answer. You have to do so many different things there too. So,
Yes.
Do you find that and also you like being in the room for Walmart for that massive deal versus the first time you're talking to bankers and trying to go through like sort of what your covenants will be and all the loan requirements and everything. It forces you to put on your big boy pants and figure stuff out. And it's funny how crippling like being in a large company can do. It's like, well, that's not my lane. This is just what I do.
Yep, it does. And you need leaders at those startups to empower you for it, right? You want a leader that's going to say, hey, here's a big project, but like, go do it and give you space to fail, give you space to mess up and back you up when it happens. Or I had plenty of those experiences very early on, right? Very junior employee, but that's what you need from leadership. Someone's going to back you up there. That was one of the reasons, like actually when I joined Rillet, I didn't come in finance. I came in and go to market and partnerships. We were too early at the time. We were 15 employees. It didn't need someone in finance. But I kind of carved a lane for myself, ended up, going in this direction. It made sense for the company, but it's a lot, like you said, you just have to wear hats. There's 100 things that need to get done. And like, you have to focus on what's priority. And if you've got some kind of ego in terms of, hey, I want to do this, I don't want to do this, you're not going to make it. And you're going to hold the business back is the sad part, right? Like it's not just going to be bad for your career, but it's going to be bad for the business if you have this kind of ego or chip on your shoulder for what I can and can't own. Like, you need people that are just going to say, hey, this needs to get done. Great. Let me do that. Let me take the ownership and just go execute.
And if you have great leadership, even if you're not an original founder, you're certainly very close to that within the first 15 people. But that if you come in and you excel and you can actually sort of invent your own role. I mean, obviously you're the head of finance and that's your job, but you do a lot of other work there as well. And I'm wondering, what was it that brought you to Rillet? Were you thinking startup mindset first and then found Rillet, or did you find Rillet first? I mean, what was the moment you knew this is for me? This is what I want to go do with young kids and everything else going on in life. You decide now, let's go into the craziness of startup land.
This is the worst time in my life to be doing a startup. But also I knew I couldn't pass this up. So like I said, like we talked about, I started my career at Walmart, loved my time there, and also knew very quickly this corporate life is not for me. I need to be somewhere, small company, moving quickly, where I can have a great deal of influence and can really help shape the company and shape the culture. Like, that's the kind of opportunity you have at a small company, especially early on like this, is to really be transformational in where the company goes. But I've been looking for Rillet for the last 10 years, and that is not exaggerating. So I grew up, I'll date myself here, but I grew up on Venmo and Robinhood, right? These very sexy fintech tools. So when I came into Walmart, literally the largest company in the world by revenue, I'm expecting, oh, wow, we're going to use the best technology in the world, right? We're the best company in the world. And day one, we're on SAP. And it looks like a program from the 90s, right? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, this is what we're using? And then I joined a startup a few years later, and I'm like, okay, great. Now we're going to use cool tools, right? At that point, like, modern treasury was really big. There's other companies that were coming out. I was like, okay, we're going to use really cool tools. And we were on QuickBooks. And I'm like, wait, what? We're a startup. Like, we should be using incredible new modern age tools, right? And we didn't. And then a little later, we migrated to NetSuite. Supposed to take 12 months, took 18, still wasn't implemented well. And I'm coming in as a junior employee going like, someone's going to fix this, right? Like, there's no way these tools survive the future. The next startup I was at, we were on Sage Intacct. And as a user, I'm like, it's just so clear. Someone is going to build something here. I don't know who, I don't know how, I don't know when. As I got a bit older and farther in my career, I started to understand why these systems have stayed around for so long, right? I started to understand who the buyer was and the usefulness and all these things, and like why there's just a moat, why NetSuite, for example, has been the default solution for the last 20 years. But it was so clear as a user, like, someone's going to fix this. So I actually found Rillet during my MBA. And they say in MBA that, your network's going to lead to future jobs, and that's a big part of the marketing. Thankfully, in my case, it happened to be true, which was nice. Is a friend of mine posted a internship for Rillet in our Slack channel. And I immediately saw that and said, I don't want to intern here. I want to work here full time. Like, can you put me in touch with the founder? And basically begged the founder, like, what do you need? Right? Like, this is the future. I could go get some corporate job at Amazon. Someone's going to build the next NetSuite. And if I don't get to at least try, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life. Like, I have to try this. And I told this to my wife. It's like, we have a 1-year-old. We want to have more kids. This is horrible timing, right? And my wife has done startups before. She's gone from like literally day one to IPO. She's seen the 100-hour work weeks herself, right? So she knows. But I'm like, I have to try this. And so we jumped in. And it was, not the salary you should take after MBA. It was not, the safe place you should take with families. Like, no good reasons to do this, except that I know, like, this is the future of finance and accounting. And if I don't at least try to have an influence here, I'm going to miss this and wish I had done this, the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and truthfully, it's, you're gambling on the company, you're gambling on yourself, but there's a reason that you put in all the work for the MBA, and you have this passion, and it's like, I don't know, it's that two roads diverged in the yellow wood or whatever. You got to pick the one. So I respect that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny in some ways, like, and you can always do this looking back, right? But in some ways I can look back over my history and career, which I honestly didn't like plan very intentionally. Like, I'll tell this to folks is, I think it's not too wise to like over plan your career. Right? Like, I thought I was going to go work for the World Bank when I was 19, and that didn't happen. Thank God. Right. And so it's actually, I think, poor to over plan career. Much better to just say yes when the opportunity comes. And a lot of what I've done has literally like crafted my story for this. of going from very kind of corporate finance and accounting into startups and being able to do the FP&A plus the accounting work, all the reporting, all those details, then doing MBA, worked at Mercury for a bit where I did partnerships, right? Which is literally what I've run at Rillet for the last year, right? So there's all these things that I started to do and would build up that have fed directly into what I'm doing now that I didn't plan for, that you can't make those things happen when you're 18 and going to no-name school. I grew up in the Midwest, right? I shouldn't be here at one of the hottest startups in Silicon Valley. My story doesn't lend itself that direction, but it's happened.
That's great. And I want to commend you on your lofty ideals and goals at 18 and 19, because at that age, I thought I was going to be like the next Hunter Thompson. That was my life goal. So
Hey, it's not too late. It's not too late, Glenn.
Yeah. FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, the world's #1 FP&A solution. DataRails is the artificial intelligence-powered financial planning and analysis platform built for Excel users. That's right, you can stay in Excel, but instead of facing hell for every budget, month-end close, or forecast, you can enjoy a paradise of data consolidation, advanced visualization reporting, and AI capabilities, plus game-changing insights, giving you instant answers and your story created in seconds. Find out why more than 1,500 companies use DataRails to uncover their company's real story. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Learn more at datarails.com. I think I'm still thrown off by the Isaac Asimov thing, so I probably should have asked this question earlier on. I think certainly most everyone in finance has heard of Rillet, but for listeners who may not know Rillet, how do you describe what the company does, the problems the company's trying to solve? Give me the overview of Rillet.
Yeah, the TLDR, especially for finance listeners, kind of what NetSuite did for the cloud era, that's what Rillet is doing for the AI era. So NetSuite brought the GL to the internet, brought accounting to the internet. Fantastic automation, honestly. We're making the GL intelligent. So with the way that technology has developed, the way even like integrations, applications have developed, and then especially with AI today, using these old tools is really holding accounting and finance teams back, is kind of preventing them from moving quickly. And that's what Rillet is doing, is making the 0-day close a reality.
I know SAP and NetSuite and all the battleships, the old guard, they're adding AI into what they do. NetSuite started with their MCP server, and they've got NetSuite Next, and there's SAP Joule or whatever they're doing. But I think about those platforms, and I think about the technology they're built on. I just picture the old database with the wrapper over it, sort of the Web 1.0 era. And that's, I'm not trying to dog any software platform on the show. Obviously, I work with a lot of people, but I do think that there are limitations when you're married to the old, this is the way things were, versus what Rillet does as you come into the market as an AI-native ERP. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint and from the company, I mean, what does AI-native actually mean, and how does that show up differently for finance teams than the tools that they've been using in the past?
Yep. Yeah, it's a good question. Speaking of like some of the legacy players, if I can take a step back for a minute, there's a book called Soft War on Larry Ellison, and it's a fantastic profile of both him and really the rise of Oracle. And it chronicles actually the story of Oracle, and starting from kind of that on-prem database. And then as the world moved to the internet, Oracle literally had to basically scrap everything they had built and rebuild the entire application for the internet. It was literally a bet the company moment where Oracle is competing with SAP and has to build this kind of completely new system for the internet. That is the same thing happening today, right? That's exactly what you're saying. It's like these legacy tools, the architecture is different. It is not just like, you couldn't just take this on-prem software and throw it into the cloud. Like, we still have folks on QuickBooks Desktop today. It's something like 40% of their customers are still on desktop. The tail is so long for these things, right? But the architecture is different, right? So in order for these legacy players to compete in this AI era, it's not enough to just kind of throw AI on top. You have to rebuild the system from the ground up. That was the core insight Rillet had, is we said, hey, we could actually build an AI tool on top of NetSuite, right? Like, that could be a direction we could have gone. We have a vision for 0-day close, have a vision to change the lives of millions of accountants and take them from kind of these back office manual workers to the heroes of the team, right? So that's this vision. We could have built something on top of NetSuite. or any of the legacy tools. And I think there's a market for that. But the hard part there is, one, you don't control your destiny. It's kind of like, I think about Zynga, for example, built one of the best gaming businesses potentially ever. And then Facebook changes their algorithm, throttles the company overnight, right? You're completely dependent on one source. If you build on top of a system like a NetSuite, they change their API, change their functionality, do something differently in their system, it could kill your business the next day, right? So we knew we had to own the data and the data structure. We had to control our destiny, both from a business strategic standpoint, but also to provide the best experience for the customer. We need to control that data, right? So that was kind of core insight for Rillet is, hey, let's not build on top of these systems. Let's actually go all the way. Let's actually be ambitious and rebuild this system. And at the time, massive bet, right? Who wants to go compete with NetSuite, right? There's a reason why they're the default system and have been for so long. It's an incredible tool. I don't know if I want to say that if this goes on, goes publicly, since I talked about that on LinkedIn, but it's an amazing tool, incredibly useful, right? But for this AI era, you need a different system, right? You need a system that is built for this era. In the same way in the cloud era, you needed something built for the cloud era, not on-prem. If in the cloud era, you were a company running on on-prem software, left in the dust. You're not going to make it, right? Big switch for folks, big difference for a CFO to take a bet on NetSuite, right? Now NetSuite's the default, but it didn't used to be. Companies didn't used to go public on NetSuite, right? There was a time when they were building this narrative, but because the internet was growing and growing so quickly, folks knew they had to take a bet and get off the on-prem software, go to the internet. We're in the same place today. And the companies that don't make these moves early, they will get left in the dust by the companies that do.
That's probably a really good reminder for CFOs who are old like me for the most part, because I was around when all those debates were happening, going from on-prem to the cloud. And it was the whole idea of, for that, it was, well, for security, we need to be on-prem. And it's like, do you really think you're going to be better at security than S3, than Amazon, or than, whoever the on-cloud, the cloud provider was? And I think now there's this, finance and accounting people, accounting maybe more so, we're risk averse. It's hard to picture jumping into something new, and you never want to be on the bleeding edge. And there's a whole saying, no one ever got fired for picking IBM or, whoever the incumbent is or whatever. So how does that play out in your go-to-market? And how do you see, what's the profile of a customer who is like, you know what, we need a change. We're going to go ahead and we're going to ditch IBM and we're going to ditch, the old guard, and we're going to go with something new. What's happening out there that people are seeing this and making the change?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over time. So in the early days, and even still in many ways today, the best customers are the millennial CFOs and controllers, right? It's folks like myself. In many ways, NetSuite was always forced upon us because someone else was making the decision, right? So it's like me in that profile, right? I come into this startup, want to use cool tools, but we use NetSuite, right? And it's not that I want to. It may not even be that CFO wants to, right? But it's what's there, right?
Yeah.
So, but I expect as a millennial who's grown up with consumer grade software, I expect that in my business applications, right? So you see this with tools like Ramp and Brex, is they have completely rethought how AP works, and they have consumer grade software for business application, and they're just crushing the market. And you kind of apply that same lens to ERP, is to have a tool which is built in a modern way, built with modern UI UX, moves quickly, implements in 4 to 8 weeks instead of 6 to 12 months, right? For folks like myself who are millennials that want to move fast and want a modern tool, really easy sell. Honestly, always has been. To your question, the go-to-market piece, the hardest part is, dare I say on this podcast publicly, it's the 50-year-old CFOs, right? It's the folks who have implemented NetSuite 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and they don't love it. They know it's probably going to take 12 to 18 months, but they're not going to be around in 3 years when the renewal comes up, right? They're not actually going to use this software. They're going to pay somebody else to do it. And so for them, it's an easy choice to go with these old ones. Those are the harder sells. Those become easier every day as we get companies like Mercer on platform, as we get companies like Function Health, as we get like these really sizable, really complex organizations onto Rillet, it becomes very easy then for a CFO to go, oh, wow, that company runs on you guys? Oh, wait, you have a public NASDAQ company on Rillet? Okay, great. That becomes then much easier for us to have the conversations. Oh, wait, you're backed by Sequoia? Oh, Sequoia backed, Stripe and Ramp and all these really ambitious category defining companies. Okay, you'll probably be around for a while, right? Like those conversations become easier every single day, but that's still what we deal with, right? Is like NetSuite is safe. Rillet is potentially a risk. On the flip side, if you bet on a system that's going to slow your team down, that's also risky, right? I think about sales teams, for example. Running on Salesforce, your reps are spending 2, 3, 4 hours updating their deals. Your competition that's actually either like augmenting Salesforce with that or using a modern AI native CRM, they're spending more time with customers, more time responding to customers. They're spending more time in the field than your reps are. And you're going to be screwed from the sales side if you don't implement AI in your sales teams. It's the same thing in finance. If you're not implementing AI, if you're not using an AI native tool like Rillet or even other AI native tools like Ramp and Brax and folks like rethinking the system, you're going to have large teams that move slow. You're going to take a long time to get your folks the numbers. You're not going to add the value to the business that you can in terms of like driving strategic decisions and direction and margin and pricing and all of these things. You can't have those conversations because you don't have the data, right? You're held back by these large, complex teams. You need to make a change to a NetSuite report. You hire someone for $10K, right? Takes 6 months to get it done. You're held back by these old, complex systems. The teams that adopt new tools are going to swim laps. You run laps around you, right? Like going to absolutely dominate you in the market if you don't adopt these tools.
Yeah, and I think it's important to inject here, everything that you're saying. You say, well, of course they're going to say that. That's marketing or whatever. But you're living that developer's thing of eat your own dog food. And you, as the head of finance there, you're using AI inside Rillet's own finance function. So can you tell me about how you're using AI and whether it's built into Rillet or not within finance at Rillet, and how that's already changing the way you operate day to day?
Yep. Yeah. And maybe on your question there, we think about that a lot of accountants have been promised automation for like the last 20 years, right? We're constantly promised, oh, we're going to take you out of the back office. You're going to do strategic work, and you buy the tool and it doesn't happen, right? Instead, like you're still doing your manual spreadsheets, still doing the manual workarounds, whatever. And so we do struggle even as the finance guy that runs marketing is what's the proper messaging there? What's the proper stories is we can tell customer stories. Like Windsor, for example, scaled 10x on a Rillet with 2 people. Their VP of finance had told us like his accountants would cry because of how much Stripe data they put through the system, right? Like they're putting insane transaction volume and it has to be reconciled. And using old legacy tools was not getting them there, was causing insane friction and frustration. Bringing on to Rillet totally transforms the entire conversation, transforms the entire work. So maybe I guess I could probably tell that story again so we can get it in a kind of more crisp fashion. But the way I might say is of like, you ask like, how do we think about AI at Rillet? What does that actually mean to be an AI native ERP? So we think about AI in 3 ways. One, we think about how the data comes into the system, think about what to do with the data when it's in the system, and how to get data out, right? And those are all really important pieces, especially with the ERP. Your ERP is only as good as the data coming in and the integrations that bring that data into the system. And this is often a big gap with legacy ERPs is, yes, all the data is in the system, but it's often done through either manual uploads or very clunky third-party integrations, and you miss a lot of that deep metadata. AI needs that context. And so often like Stripe is a perfect example. Stripe and NetSuite do not talk to each other well at all. So if you want your Stripe data in NetSuite, you often use a Snowflake aggregator. You might do manual journal entries every day or every month, and you lose all that customer history within. So you can't ask things of the data like, who's my biggest customer? Which customers churned? What contracts are at risk? You can't do any of that because the data isn't even in the ERP. That's where we've rethought the integrations differently and said, hey, if we want AI to be useful, we need to get useful data into the system. So we'll take our Stripe integration. We rebuild that integration ourselves from the ground up to make sure that when you connect Stripe to your ERP into Rillet, all that customer detail comes into the system. And then AI can both reconcile that data down to the granular level automatically, and then also be useful for queries and questions on that data. So when we talk about AI, we think about how the data comes into the system. Once the data is in the system, in some ways, we don't use AI that much because you don't need it, right? You don't actually need AI to estimate what your revenue recognition should be. You don't want that. You don't want any hallucination in there. What you want is really good software, taking the total amount, the start dates, the end dates, still enabling you to adjust and do amendments, do edits, do voids and refunds if you need to. You still need that kind of core accounting architecture in there, but you don't actually need a lot of AI in the middle once the data's in the system. But you do want to use AI both to pull data out as well as do actions within the ERP. So we can use AI to book accruals, for example, where you can ask Aura, one of our AI agents within the system, what accruals do I need to book this month? It will look back over the history and suggest accruals, and you can tell Aura to book that entry. So we'll do this for Rillet every single month, right? Where we'll look back over, ask what we're missing, and then tell it to book the journal entries for us. Rillet will also fully automate cash reconciliation. So all those entries coming in, AI will look through, read, even now today will like make suggestions for you or even give confidence intervals and say, hey, I think this is probably, 90%, likely to go through this category, this department. And so reducing that time to reconcile cash basically to zero. And then payroll's fully automated, prepaids are fully automated, fixed assets fully automated. All these kind of subledgers flow in both through just good software and then quite literally using AI on top to massage, clean, and automate much of that data directly.
Yeah, it's interesting as you talk through that. It's really the big, kind of the next challenge around AI for companies. And this goes beyond just finance use, but I think ERPs for years love to say, well, we're the system of record. Well, you're not if we're having to translate Stripe data into just a journal entry and we drop everything. And then it's not the system of record. It's this data lake, data warehouse, whatever. And yeah, but the issue, like asking questions like, what accruals should I make? So certainly, yeah, you can look at your GL and figure out what accruals you made. But when you have the knowledge across sort of the whole business domain, I don't know. It's very, I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but I'm thinking about, I've been reading a lot about context graphs lately. And so trying to figure out how to make the AI more useful by giving it this context across all the processes, all these systems and everything. And I think the nature, not saying that you guys are doing context graphs now, but the nature of where you started, you're going to be closer to able to gather this larger context and have AI that communicates with it. You're just going to be better geared for that than on one of the legacy systems, I would imagine.
Yes, very much so. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier of kind of this transition from cloud to AI era is even just the modern tools. Once again, like a Ramp, a Brex, a Rippling, they think about their API and their data output differently than many of the older tools. And so it's actually easier for us to pull, once again, that deep metadata into the system because of these new age tools and these new ways of thinking. And so really to get like the best benefit and automation across your tech stack is you need to be thinking about a kind of new age modern AI tech stack across every vertical, across AP, across AR, across GL, across payroll, kind of using any of these older systems. You'll have that same problem, right? You'll have it with NetSuite, you'll have it with trying to put these old systems, you'll get just either deep, journal entries that don't make any sense, or like you'll miss all that deep metadata, transactional history that without, like you said, that context graph, without having that detail for AI, it's just not useful, right? I remember when I was at Walmart, we talked about the data lake for years about bringing all of our data together so it could be useful. And even now, a lot of these old enterprises are trying to clean up their data. I don't know if that will ever get figured out, if they'll ever fix that. But we have an opportunity, and most of our listeners here have an opportunity as they're building their finance function at these companies to think differently about, hey, if we're going to be the Walmart, the Amazon in 10, 15, 20 years from now, what are the systems we need to put in place today so we don't have those data lake issues later on, right, in 20 years? So if you put in systems like Rillet that are thinking about data architecture very differently, it then enables you to have access to this data, like you said, these context graphs, all across the organization.
As you were talking about that, I'm also thinking about, I think for a long time, ERPs were trying to be the complete end-to-end. They were the system of record, they were doing everything, but then competition, the whole SaaS era, competition came up and it's like, well, if this company does AP better, if this company does AR better, if this company does expense management, and then people start bolting on and then you kind of get this unbundled ERP And then you end up with this disparate data that's not flowing through systems. And what is the source of truth? And reporting gets more difficult. And I'm wondering, as Rillet scales, I mean, do you picture one day Rillet doing everything, or is it like, you know what, this is our lane, this is our focus. People are going to use Stripe and Ramp and whatever other tools. I mean, I guess, like, what parts of the Finance Foundation have you started to sort of formalize, and do you picture being part of Rillet versus a connector to Rillet? And like, are there things that you're focused on now, but decided, you know what, we're going to hold off on that? I don't know. But I don't know if that's too much inside baseball, if there's how much you can share on that, but I'd love to hear what you can tell us about it.
I'll defer in some ways in can always change tomorrow. I'll say, I guess this will always change. But the honest answer is, if we can't do it well, we should not do it. So, for example, not to dog on NetSuite too much, but NetSuite has their own CRM. Almost everyone still uses Salesforce. NetSuite has their own FP&A tool. Almost everyone still uses an outside sourced one, right? So my perspective has always been, and will always be, if we can do it well, we should do it. But if not, then why bother? Tools like Ramp and Brex are so exceptional. If we try to compete with them, we would be toast. It would be bad for us and bad for our customers. It is much better for us to focus on the integration. Whatever you're going to use, your Ramp, Brex, Rippling, Spend, whatever, how can we get that into the system effectively so you can do your books? Whatever you use for payroll, we're not going to try to compete there. Very foolish for us. That's not our DNA. Instead, we're accountants. How can we build the best integration possible so your data can come in accurately? You want to use Stripe? Great. I don't want to compete with Stripe. Do you want to compete with Stripe? No way, right? So let's figure out how we can make the best integration possible and really be that system of record. Because you're right. You're going to bolt on all these best-in-class tools, which only works if you have good pipes. That's the only way it works. Otherwise, you get that exact same problem where you're trying to put Stripe into your ERP and it's not connected and you're using Snowflake or whatever. But if the integrations work at that kind of deep data layer, then you can actually be a system of record and still use the best-in-class tools around the ERP.
It's funny, as we talk through all this, I know Rillet customers have probably a lot more data than you guys as a startup do. And so I'm thinking about, you're probably not even seeing the full advantage of the software, because having been in the startup space myself too, I know how difficult it was when you're trying to make a forecast and everything, relies on these inflection points, and it's all assumptions on top of assumptions on top of assumptions. And you just don't have data. You've got public market data, and you've got a lot of assumptions and ideas. But whereas you bring on a customer to Rillet, they've got 10, 15, 20 years of data. Suddenly they've got, they can do a whole lot more with the software than you can. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I want to talk a little bit about the internal team, because it's funny trying to balance what we talk about here, because you're doing so much in the world of finance and accounting with Rillet. But also, I'm sure our listeners would like to know what's happening internally, but you also do a lot of work outside of just the finance there. So I guess I'm just going to open the door here, maybe for you to tell me about the nature of the work that you are personally doing at Rillet now, and sort of how you're looking at your team today. And if you're probably still defining KPIs and still collecting data and figuring out what's important. I don't know. This is sort of because we're getting close on time, but I want to just maybe kind of open the kimono a little bit to your world and how you're running finance and how you're thinking about data and what else you're doing at Rillet right now.
Yeah, no, great question. Most of my time today is spent on growth. Is how can we grow the business? And in some ways it helps. We're still so early. The board doesn't care about the budget that much. Growth covers a lot of sins. At the same time, as the company is growing, we're now Series B. We are starting to get more formal there. We have set a budget for this year. We have a plan for the year. It's already changed, right? Even Q1, we're only about a week in, but our forecast is already changing, for the quarter based on how it's going. So everything is changing very quickly. But I do have the benefit in the seat of being able to focus most of my time on growth. And it's great because that's what matters for the business, right? If we're not growing, almost nothing else matters, especially in this kind of AI era. And so most of my time and energy is spent on how can I help Rillet grow faster? How can I spread this message of Rillet to more CFOs broadened our reach and brand recognition in order to get more folks in the funnel effectively. I hate to say that for I hate to sound like a sales guy, but that's what I think about is how do I get more CFOs in the funnel, right? How do I increase our growth metrics? And what's fun then is both very fun to be in this seat. So Ramp is actually hiring a senior director of finance transformation right now. They report to marketing, and they are hiring an ex-CFO or VP of finance, and their whole role is going to be posting on social, being active on LinkedIn, going to conferences, being Ramp's face to the world. And Ramp is recognizing you need an ICP, someone who has done this before, who knows your customer and can kind of be that marketing voice to the customer. In many ways, very similar to what I've been doing at Rillet for the last 12 months. I think we're going to see every company have a role like this. And what I love about this is Rillet's finance and accounting team will always have to be customer facing in some respect. Is even as we hire a controller, for example, and they do our audit and build a team, they're going to have to be customer facing. They're going to need to go to dinners. Other controllers will ask them, how do you run Rillet on Rillet? They are literally going to be, in many ways, our best reference. And sometimes that's not comfortable for a controller, right? But to me, it's very exciting to be able to build a finance and accounting function with that kind of mindset, with that opportunity, and appeals to the right kind of folks, right? Who want to build a tool that they themselves could be using. One of our solutions consultants told me yesterday, one of the reasons he joined is he is a prior accountant, was a kind of, and then kind of went into solutions consulting at a different ERP. Now here's at Rillet, and he's like, I want to build a tool that makes me want to be an accountant again. And that's why he joined Rillet, was so excited about what we're building and kind of the future here. And the sad part is when we really nail this, maybe he goes back into accounting for real, right? But the beauty is that's what we want to build here is I'm building the tool that I would like to use, that if I were still in kind of traditional finance seat, I could buy Rillet. I would buy Rillet. That's the beauty of what we're doing here, what we get to build. And that's why we have so many CPAs that join the company, so many finance and accounting folks. Our entire team is filled with people who have lived this pain themselves and want to build a better system that they themselves could use either in prior roles or in future roles, which I think is really exciting.
And that's so interesting because you think about, there's so many people who sort of have this idea of, I want to start a company. I'll figure out what it is later. And then you sort of end up trying to shoehorn some weird idea that nobody's interested in. But if you have finance and accounting people who've experienced the pain and know what they're solving for, then that contributes so much more. Then it's just a matter of execution.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I actually found a notebook of mine from a few years back where I literally startup ideas. And one of those was build an ERP, ? So this is obviously not a new idea by any means, but this is true of many employees. Our implementation team, for example, we do our implementations in-house. 50% of that team is CPAs, is folks that have seen these workflows and know this experience and have implemented NetSuite, Acumatica, Sage, have done these implementations. And so when a controller buys Rillet, goes through implementation, they can trust this other person in the process because they've done these workflows, right? Our head of product is an ex-controller herself who implemented NetSuite and Sage. She's building the tool for herself. And that makes such a difference when a tool is built by the users. We're still built by literally the best engineers, the best designers, right? You still have to augment those skills. We're now hiring actual marketers in our team instead of me, which is a much large relief, So you still need those domain expertise, but having folks in seat, like we said, who have lived this problem, seen this problem, experienced the pain themselves, it makes you build a product in a completely different way.
Yeah. And as you go through and say all this, what I'm really picturing is, you're the head of finance, but because you're so focused out in so many other areas, you realize the importance of finance, but also where it sits in the organization. So you're actually out there, you're identifying the levers, going out and actually pulling them and driving the growth of the company. And I think as Rillet gets bigger, you stay there, or whatever your future holds, your approach to finance is going to be very different than someone who came up through CPA, audit, whatever the old school sort of traditional path is. And I think you're sort of indicative of what the future of finance looks like.
I think so too. I hope so. It's so funny. I was actually talking to my founder this week as we were talking about marketing metrics. And he's like, oh, do we know, how much we're paying for a lead from Google? And I'm like, oh yeah, I could pull it up right over here. And he's like, oh, that's awesome, right? Like he had just been talking with another group of founders last week, and they're all complaining about how they can't get marketing data and can't get analytics and all these things. And when you have someone who their whole life has been analytics and reporting and budgeting, right, and comes into a seat like marketing, like, of course we're going to have the data, right? Like, of course we're going to have it. Like, I need that for myself to make decisions. So it's very refreshing to me to be able to be in the seat and still, in many ways, use my finance jobs, but do it in a marketing fashion to really like enable us to scale that function in a very high ROI way.
That's great. Okay, well, we talked before the show. You said, how long is this going to go? And I said, man, I'm going to shoot for 40 minutes. I'll never hit it. We're at like 48
we're gonna
minutes
edit
right
it down
now.
Anyway. We'll trim it. You'll cut all the bloopers I did. So I think we'll be all right.
We have two questions we ask all of our guests. And so I'm going to throw these out to you now. The first is, what is something that most people don't know about you? Something that they couldn't just figure out just by Googling you?
Yeah. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So normally I would say I have 2 kids and I love being a dad, but you can see that on LinkedIn. So that's not a surprise. What is probably harder to find out about me is I love coffee. And when I say coffee, I mean like the bougie, snobby, hipster coffee. And so I will typically only drink coffee from a hipster coffee shop. I will only order beans that are from Ethiopia or Kenya, and then only from a few select set of roasters. And I don't care about refined foods. I can't tell the difference between $2 chuck and $100 bottle of wine. But when it comes to coffee, I will not drink Starbucks. I think it's complete garbage. So I really, really enjoy a good brew. The other thing folks will not know about me is that I'm deeply religious as well. So it informs a lot of my approach to parenting, to startups, to how I lead the teams here at Rillet. It's a lot of how I was raised, obviously, as well. And in many ways, like being deeply religious felt taboo for a while, especially in Silicon Valley. There's actually a Silicon Valley episode, which is very funny, where this guy gets actually outed for being a Christian. And it's funny because it feels true that in many ways feels like it's changing today. But it's still hard to know how to talk about faith in a corporate setting, and especially in Silicon Valley. But it is kind of deeply true to who I am and how I approach the world. So I think it's important to mention.
Yeah, and it's that moral foundation and applying good ethics and principles that come with it. All right, the last question, and I'm very curious what you're going to say here, because all the work that you're doing and all the work that is built into Rillet, but I know you have a finance background and are a finance guy at heart, and we ask everybody. So I'm really eager to hear your answer here. What is your favorite Excel function and why?
I love this question. I remember literally my first week at Walmart. I remember looking to the treasury manager on my left, and he was all in Excel, no mouse, going wicked fast around, the model. And I was like, I want to do that when I grow up, right? I love Excel. The funny thing is, my favorite Excel function, I'm a very simple man. It's the sum if statement. As it's very clean,
Yep.
Very simple. I use it in every single model. I would probably say some ifs. I actually always use some ifs, even if it's a sum if. I think it's a better formula. I don't know if I'm unique in that sense, but I think the sum ifs, even if you're doing one column, is much better. You can always I'll use index batch if it's complicated, but it just works, right? It's a very useful, very practical formula. So yeah, maybe call it simple, but some ifs all the way.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, so I was trying to Google while we were talking. I can't find the exact quote. I wanted to take us out with an Isaac Asimov quote, but it's something along the lines of, and I thought this was, you've just got my brain hooked on foundation and psychohistory for planning, but it was something like, planning doesn't guarantee success. You have to improvise as well, or something like that is a quote from Isaac Asimov on it, but I couldn't find the exact quote. But I think it's very funny on an FP&A show, and what you said in that whole, planning isn't sufficient because it's part of our job title, and then adding in the improvisation and thinking about how you're doing that at a startup. I think that's fantastic. So this has been great fun. I hear you typing away. Were you able to find it?
I don't know. I'm asking ChatGPT. Here it is. to succeed, planning alone is insufficient. One must improvise as well. Isaac Asimov Foundation.
Yep, there it is. That's I need to put that in my next finance book that I put out.
Oh man, that is so good. I forgot he had said that. And man, this is so funny because like when you think about foundation series, the whole point is that you can't do anything about like it's going to happen anyway. And I struggle with the idea as a startup of like how much you can influence, right? In some ways, like what's going to happen will happen. And it's literally not worth the bald and the gray hairs and the wrinkles to stress about every single meeting, especially early on in seed stage. Every meeting feels hypercritical. Every partner meeting, like everything is hypercritical. So in some ways, like everything matters. You need to knock on every single door, push every single direction you can. And also, it's either going to work or it's going to not. And you don't know. So you can't like, I put so much pressure on myself in the first 6 to 12 months of Rillet. And I still put a lot of pressure on myself now, but my perspective has changed in that everything's fixable. If you knock on enough doors, you'll find one. And you might have to knock on a hell of a lot of them. When we host dinners, I used to cold invite 200 CFOs. These dinners, like I would literally email 200 CFOs myself personally, like didn't automate it through Gmail, right? Like full, just like, like forcing this thing into existence. And now I don't have to do that, right? Because we've built this network of folks we can invite to dinners and it's very different now. But early days at a startup requires doing things that do not scale and really just pushing it every door possible, or you're not going to make it.
Love it. Well, Stephen, this has been fantastic. Really enjoyed you coming on the show, and wish you guys the best success and good luck with your recent move and with the kids and everything. I know you've got your hands full.
Thank you, Glenn, very much. This has been a fantastic conversation. Looking forward to doing it again. Thank you.